Welcome to Nocturnal Tales. Tonight's story takes us to Vienna, 1928, a city of chandeliers and cafes where old titles still open doors, and every smile seems to hide a private strain. Our mystery is the Last Waltz at Schönbrunn. An imperial backdrop, a closed circle of elegant people, and a death that arrives wearing perfect manners, like something carefully arranged to make everyone stop asking questions. As always, this is an original Nocturnal Tales story, written in the spirit and style of the great Golden Age mysteries, but entirely our own creation. And if you'd like more stories, you can find our full back catalogue on Patreon and Spotify, with extra new stories there as well. The links are in the description. Now then, listen closely. Keep your conclusions in check, and do not trust the obvious too soon. Let us begin. Chapter 1. A Death in White Gloves. It is a mistake to imagine that a city forgets its dead merely because it has acquired trams, motorcars, and new politics. Vienna, when first I saw it in the winter of 1928, had the appearance of a woman who had once been the greatest beauty in Europe and had not yet forgiven the world for noticing that she was no longer young. She remained elegant, naturally. One does not lose that in a generation. The cafés were warm, the pastries elaborate, the waiters haughty in a manner that suggested they had personally known emperors. Music drifted from doors half opened onto narrow streets. White statues looked down from darkened façades with an indifference that was almost aristocratic. But beneath all that grace there was something else, a kind of strain in the air, as though the city had learned to smile without ever unclenching its teeth. Poirot admired it immediately. "It is civilized," he pronounced, settling himself into the corner of our coffee-house as though he had been born there. "Observe, Hastings. The small marble table, the polished spoon, the newspaper folded exactly so. Even in decline, Vienna understands presentation." I said that for my part, I should have preferred London, if London could have been moved somewhere warmer and provided with better cakes. Poirot lifted one finger. "You speak nonsense, but with sincerity. It is one of your gifts." We had come, as we often came anywhere, for rest. That is to say, I had come for rest, and Poirot had come because some doctor in Switzerland had told him his nerves required calm, regular meals, and a temporary absence of English weather. Rest for Poirot, however, is like vegetarianism for a tiger. An interesting theory, but seldom a lasting condition. For 2 days, Vienna seemed determined to behave itself. Poirot arranged his ties, criticized Austrian moustaches, and developed strong opinions on the correct serving temperature of coffee. I wandered the Ringstrasse, listened to snippets of German I only half understood, and admired a city that seemed to have dressed itself in memory. On the third morning, trouble arrived in the shape of a lady in black. She was shown to our table at 10:30, just as Poirot had begun a speech on the superiority of Belgian order over Austrian melancholy. She wore a hat with a narrow veil, gloves of pearl-grey kid, and the sort of self-command one sees only in women who have either ruled households for many years or survived disasters too private to discuss. She could not have been more than 35, though grief had a way of adding authority without adding age. "Mr. Hercule Poirot?" she asked in excellent French. Poirot rose and bowed. "At your service, madam." She glanced at me. Poirot performed the introduction. "This is Captain Hastings, my friend and colleague. He is discreet, loyal, and occasionally useful." I protested, but she did not smile. Her eyes were fixed on Poirot with an intensity that suggested she had delayed coming only because she had exhausted every other possibility. "My name is Countess Elena von Hartberg," she said. "My brother is dead." Poirot indicated the empty chair. Sit down, Countess. Begin at the beginning. Death is always untidy, but facts must be arranged. She sat, removed one glove finger by finger, and laid both gloves on the table with extraordinary precision. "My brother," she said, "was Count Lucas von Hartberg. He was found dead 3 nights ago in a private pavilion in the grounds of Schönbrunn." I looked up sharply. Even I knew Schönbrunn by reputation. One does not hear of corpses turning up in imperial surroundings without becoming attentive. "The police say," she continued, "that it was suicide." Poirot steepled his fingers. "And you do not agree?" "I know it was not." There was no theatricality in the way she said it. That, more than anything, made one listen. "Why?" asked Poirot. She hesitated. "Because they say he died there with a young woman, Anna Berek, the daughter of a Hungarian diplomat. She was found beside him, both shot. The newspapers have not printed everything, of course, but they have printed enough. They are calling it a romantic tragedy, a final pact. They are already whispering another Mayerling." At that name, even the waiter passing behind us seemed to slow slightly. Poirot's eyes sharpened at once. "Ah." "My brother," said the Countess, "was not the kind of man to die for romance." There was a pause. That may strike the reader as a cold thing for a sister to say, but it was not said coldly. It was said with bitter familiarity. "Tell us about him," said Poirot. "Lucas was 32, charming when he wished to be. Careless with money, careless with women, clever enough to be dangerous but too idle to make proper use of it. After the war, after the Empire, after everything." She made a small gesture with one hand. "Men like my brother continued to live as though the orchestra might begin again if only they remained in costume." "A nostalgic fool," I suggested. Her eyes moved briefly toward me. "No, Captain. Something more practical. A man who had understood early that old names still open doors, even when the treasury is empty." Poirot nodded. "Debts?" "Yes." "Enemies?" "Undoubtedly." "Was he in love with this Mademoiselle Berek?" The Countess looked almost offended. "No. Infatuated, perhaps. Amused, certainly. But not in love." "Was she in love with him?" "I cannot say. She was young, pretty, very ambitious, I think. That is often mistaken for devotion." Poirot leaned back. "Describe for me the scene." Elena von Hartberg's hand tightened on one glove. "The pavilion lies apart from the main paths. It used once to be used for private musicales. My brother had access through old acquaintances. On Thursday evening there was a supper at the apartment of Baron Reisler, a patron of the arts and collector of faded nobility. My brother attended. So did Anna Berek. So did several others. At some point after midnight, my brother and the girl left." "And were later found dead?" "Yes, early the next morning the caretaker discovered them." "How?" "In chairs facing one another." That caught even Poirot's attention. "Facing one another?" "Yes. A little round table between them. On it stood 2 glasses, a silver cigarette case, and a single white rose. My brother had been shot in the temple. Anna Berek also. A pistol was found near his right hand." "And the police call this suicide?" "They call it a murder-suicide, or a lover's death. They are not decided which version is most convenient." Her voice hardened. "What matters is that they have decided it is finished." Poirot was silent for a moment. "Convenient for whom?" he asked softly. "For everyone." It was such a neat answer that even Poirot gave the faintest smile. She went on. "My family wishes silence. The Bereks wish silence. Baron Reisler wishes silence because his guests were involved. The police wish silence because Vienna is tired of scandals with old titles attached to them. And the newspapers. She stopped. The newspapers wish for one glorious week of lies. Poirot tapped one finger against the table. But you, Countess, do not wish silence. No. Why not? For the first time, something like emotion broke through the discipline of her face. Because my brother sent me a note that same evening. She drew a folded paper from her handbag and placed it before him. Poirot opened it carefully. I leaned over enough to read. Elena, if anything absurd is said tomorrow, do not believe it. I have at last found the courage to refuse. Poirot read it twice. When was this delivered? By hand. Just after 1 a.m. Refuse what? I do not know. Did he often write to you? Never. Poirot passed the note to me. The handwriting was quick, slanting, nervous, but unmistakably that of a man writing in haste and with purpose. He expected trouble, I said. Yes, said Poirot quietly, or wished to prepare her for it. The Countess lowered her veil. Will you take the case? Poirot did not answer at once. He looked out through the tall café window, where snow was beginning to drift across the street in thin white lines. A carriage passed. A tram bell rang. Somewhere deeper in the café, a spoon struck china with ridiculous delicacy. Then Poirot turned back. Countess, I will tell you something unpleasant. When a death resembles an old scandal, people become lazy. They see the outline before they examine the details. They say, ah, yes, we know this story already. And because they know the story, they cease to see the truth. For the first time, she seemed to breathe. So you will help me? Yes, said Poirot, because I dislike laziness in the mind, and because whoever arranged 2 bodies facing one another beside a white rose possessed either a taste for theatre or a desire to borrow from the past. In either case, that person has already made one mistake. What mistake? I asked. Poirot's eyes gleamed. He has tried to compose the scene before understanding the audience. That afternoon we drove to Schönbrunn, under a sky the colour of tarnished silver. The pavilion stood beyond the public grandeur, among quieter paths and trees stripped almost black by winter. It was a graceful little building, octagonal, pale, and elegant in the melancholy fashion of places built for music that no longer exists. A police constable admitted us reluctantly, after a letter from Countess von Hartberg, and a good many references to private influence. Inside, the room was cold enough to make one's breath visible. I remember the chairs first. They were still there, though the bodies had been removed. 2 gilt chairs, facing one another across a small inlaid table. On the polished floor, faint dark stains, where the blood had been imperfectly cleaned. On the mantel, a clock stopped at 1:17. Heavy curtains drawn half shut. A smell of dust, extinguished fire, and something medicinal beneath it. Poirot moved very little at first. He has that habit. He becomes still in the way certain hunting animals become still, as if all the movement has gone inward. No sign of struggle, I murmured. Perhaps, said Poirot. He bent over the table. The glasses were gone, but rings remained in the wood where moisture had stood. He examined the carpet, the hearth, the angle of the chairs. Then, without warning, he crouched. Hastings. Yes? Look there. Near the leg of Anna Berwick's chair, at least where the chair had stood when the body was found, there was a tiny crescent of white lodged in the carpet. I stooped. Porcelain? No, mother of pearl. He lifted it carefully with the tip of his penknife. From a button? I suggested. Possibly, or from an ornament. He straightened, crossed to the window and frowned at the latch. It was opened, he said. In this weather? Recently. See the mark. The brass edge bore a fresh scratch, bright against the older dull metal. I went over. Below the window lay the frozen ground of the garden, crossed by many footprints now spoiled by snow and official boots. Beyond, the trees stood in ranks like silent witnesses. Poirot's gaze lifted to the mantel. "The clock, mon ami. Why did it stop? Because someone knocked it over?" "It was not knocked over. It stands straight. Yet it stopped at 17 minutes past 1. He stepped closer. Then he smiled, a very small smile, and never one I have learned to like. "What is it?" "My friend," said Poirot, "either this was a double death arranged with extraordinary neatness, or someone has been here afterward, correcting the poetry." He reached out and touched the marble mantelpiece just beneath the clock. His finger came away black. "Soot," I said. "Yes, fresh soot, yet no fire was laid." He looked around the elegant, lifeless room. "Already I see too much arrangement. That is never a good sign." At that moment there was a sharp knock at the outer door. A uniformed inspector entered, broad-shouldered, fair, and plainly annoyed at finding us there before him. "Herr Poirot," he said in heavily accented French, "I am Inspector Brenner. I understood you had taken an interest in our little tragedy." Poirot inclined his head. Brenner's gaze moved over the room. "I hope you do not intend to make this into a circus. Vienna has had enough of dead aristocrats." Poirot slipped the mother-of-pearl fragment into his pocket. "My dear Inspector," he said pleasantly, "when there is already a white rose, 2 pistols, a pavilion, and an echo of Mayerling, I fear the circus began before either of us arrived." Brenner's expression did not soften. "No doubt," he said. "You imagine it is murder." Poirot smiled. "No, I imagine nothing. That is why I am dangerous." And with that, the case began. Chapter 2. The Girl with the Amber Cigarette Holder. Inspector Brenner was one of those men who appear to regard politeness as a decorative weakness best left to diplomats and footmen. He was, however, not a fool. That was apparent within 5 minutes. He did not obstruct us. He merely watched us in a manner that suggested he expected us to blunder into error and save him trouble. "The pistol belonged to Count Lucas," he said. "Several witnesses confirm he carried it sometimes. The girl had powder traces on one glove. There is testimony that the two were seen leaving together after midnight. Their affair was well known." "Affair," said Poirot, "is a word often used when no one has the facts, but everyone has the appetite." Brenner ignored that. "There were debts, pressure. The Count had quarrelled with at least 2 men that evening. The girl was emotional. The note to the sister proves only that he anticipated scandal." "It proves," said Poirot, "that he expected falsehood." Brenner folded his arms. "Or melodrama." Poirot gave him a courteous little nod, as though awarding half a point in a debate. "What of the girl?" he asked. "Mademoiselle Anna Berek. Tell me not the gossip. Tell me the facts." Brenner answered promptly enough. She was 21, daughter of Istvan Berek, attached in some minor diplomatic capacity to the Hungarian legation. Educated, musical, pretty, frequently seen in cultivated circles somewhat above her family's financial station. No official engagement, no prior scandal. Found in evening dress, with one glove removed and the other still on. No sign of struggle upon either body. "And the rose?" I asked. Brenner's mouth tightened. "A florist on the Kärntnerstrasse supplied white roses to Baron Reisler's supper. One may assume the Count took one." "One may assume many foolish things," said Poirot. Brenner turned to me instead. "Your friend enjoys being difficult." "He enjoys being right," I said. "That remains to be seen." When he had gone, Poirot stood in silence for perhaps half a minute. Then he said, "Hastings, what is wrong with this room?" I looked round. Too neat? Exactly. Death, especially violent death, has no natural instinct for symmetry. Yet here we have chairs facing precisely, a rose placed prettily, a clock obligingly stopped, a pistol near the correct hand. It is all too obedient. Somebody has manners in the worst possible sense. We left the pavilion and made first for Baron Reisler's apartment, an enormous suite near the ring, whose staircase was lined with paintings of grim ancestors who had plainly expected posterity to remain deferential. The Baron received us in a green salon full of porcelain shepherdesses, ormolu clocks, and the exhausted luxury peculiar to families who possess objects instead of fortunes. He was a handsome man of perhaps 50, with white hair, dark brows, and the expression of one who had spent his life tolerating lesser beings for lack of an alternative. "Yes, yes," he said, waving us toward chairs. "Countess von Hartberg warned me you might come. I suppose there is no helping it. Vienna cannot resist making a chapel out of private disgrace." Poirot watched him mildly. "And can you?" Reisler's lip twitched. "Captain Hastings, is he always like this?" "Worse, when comfortable." The Baron almost smiled. "Very well, ask." The supper had been small. Himself, Count Lucas, Anna Berek, Anna's father, a young composer named Emil Novak, Frau Lotte Weiss, a singer long past youth but not yet willing to surrender its trappings, and Dr. Karl Seebach, a physician and intimate of several old families. Cards, champagne, some private music after midnight. Conversation. Nothing unusual, if one excluded the fact that nearly everyone present seemed either underfunded, over-decorated, or romantically imprudent. "Did Lucas quarrel with anyone?" asked Poirot. "With Dr. Seebach a little. Over money, I believe. Nothing dramatic. Seebach accused him of dishonorable dealing." Lucas laughed. "Seebach has the soul of a magistrate, which in a private man is always tiresome." "And with Mademoiselle Berek?" "He flirted. She permitted it. That was their established mode." "Did they leave together by arrangement?" "I could not say. They disappeared. In my experience, when a handsome man and a pretty girl vanish at 12:30, the explanation is seldom theological." Poirot nodded. "Who supplied the rose?" "The table decorations included roses. Anyone might have taken one. And the girl, was she serious?" "At 21, everyone is serious about something. But whether about Lucas? No. She liked admiration, music, attention, clever men. Lucas was convenient because he was titled and amusing. Not beloved? Certainly not by me." Poirot rose after a few more questions, none of which produced much. Yet outside, on the stairs, he said quietly, "He lies well." "In what way?" "In the old way. Not with invention, but with omission. He gives only what costs him nothing." Our next call was on the Bereks. Their apartment was respectable but modest, with heavy curtains and the bleak tidiness of a household that had learned to hide all signs of strain. Istvan Berek received us with grave formality. He was a narrow man with a scholar's stoop and a diplomat's caution. "My daughter is dead," he said. "I have no interest in theatrical speculation." Poirot bowed. "Then we are united, monsieur." Anna's room remained untouched. He allowed us to see it after the briefest pause. It was not the room of a tragic romantic heroine. There were scores of music on the piano, French novels, scent bottles, a photograph of the Prater in summer, 2 fashion sketches pinned half-hidden inside a wardrobe door, and on the dressing table an amber cigarette holder of unusual elegance. Poirot picked it up. "Did your daughter smoke?" "Rarely. Yet she owned this?" "A gift." "From Count Lucas?" "No." Berek hesitated. "From whom, then?" "A family friend." There are moments when one knows that to press hard is to get nothing. Poirot merely replaced the holder. On the writing desk lay a torn envelope. Poirot's eye went to it at once. "May I?" Berec gave a stiff nod. The letter inside had been removed, but on the blotting pad beneath there remained the faint impression of the last line written. Poirot tilted it toward the light. I saw only scratches. He saw more. "Hastings," he said, "your pencil." I handed it. He shaded the page lightly, revealing the pressure marks. "Cannot continue unless the letters are returned. Midnight is the limit." Poirot looked up. Berec had gone pale. "What letters?" asked Poirot. The Hungarian's face hardened with desperate speed. "I do not know." "You know exactly." Berec's hand gripped the back of a chair. "I know only that my daughter made foolish friendships and regretted some of them. Now she is dead. I will not help turn her into gossip." "We are not discussing gossip. We are discussing blackmail." Berec closed his eyes. "Leave." Poirot inclined his head and obeyed. In the corridor I said, "So Anna was being threatened." "Yes, and by someone connected to letters she wished returned." "Love letters?" Poirot gave that exasperating little movement of his shoulders. "People always think first of love letters. Why? Letters may contain debts, secrets, political remarks, humiliations, promises. The human race writes far too much, Hastings." That evening we went to Café Central, where Vienna seemed to collect its smokers, poets, parasites, and failed geniuses under one high, forgiving ceiling. It was there that we found Emil Novak. He was younger than I expected, perhaps 27, thin and dark, with restless fingers, and the melancholy eyes that young composers cultivate either naturally or as professional equipment. He knew Anna, adored her, and plainly hated Lucas. "I told the police already," he said. "She was not in love with that man. She laughed at him." "Yet she went with him," I said. "She went where life seemed less dull." Poirot stirred his coffee. "And with you was life dull?" Novak flushed. "She respected me." "Ah, respect. The consolation prize of unsuccessful devotion." Novak ignored the jibe. "She was frightened that evening." Poirot's spoon stopped. "Of whom?" "I do not know. She had received a note. She burned it in the ashtray before supper, but not at once. I saw the paper in her hand." "Did Count Lucas see it too?" "I think so." He asked her something quietly. She said, "Not now." Later I heard them quarrel in the corridor. "What words?" "I caught only one sentence. Lucas said, 'You should have told me sooner.'" Poirot leaned forward slightly. "And then?" "She laughed, the way women laugh when they are afraid and will not show it. Then she said, 'You are not the one I fear.'" That was better than anything we had heard all day. Poirot asked one or two more questions, then let the young man go. We sat a while in the warmth and smoke of the café. At last I said, "You think the answer lies in the letters?" "I think," said Poirot, "that the answer lies in the people who wanted the dead arranged like a legend. Mayerling, my friend, is not merely scandal, it is style. Someone wished Vienna to see an old ghost and stop asking new questions. And who has that sort of mind?" Poirot's eyes followed the waiters moving noiselessly between tables. "Someone who understands that memory is a weapon." He took from his pocket the little shard of mother-of-pearl and turned it in the light. "And someone," he added, "who was not as careful as he believed." Chapter 3. A Supper of Ruined People. The next morning brought snow, newspapers, and a useful witness. The witness was not the sort one imagines when reading sensational accounts. She was not dramatic, nor trembling, nor eager. She was an elderly seamstress named Frau Kappel, who had once worked for the Hartbergs, and still altered gowns for half the grand ladies in Vienna. She came to Countess Elena's house because she had heard, by those mysterious channels that outstrip telegraphy, that a famous detective was making inquiries. "I know nothing about murder," she said, settling herself with determined modesty on the edge of a chair, "but I know buttons." Poirot, who respects expertise wherever found, bowed as though greeting a duchess. She examined the mother-of-pearl fragment through a small lorgnette and gave her verdict at once. "Not from a gentleman's shirt. Too curved. It is from a lady's shoe clasp, or more likely from one of those decorative evening fasteners fitted to a glove or bag. Cheap copies exist. This is not cheap. Good old stock, perhaps pre-war." "Who would wear such a thing?" asked Poirot. "Any woman wishing to suggest she had never noticed the Empire ended." Countess Elena, standing by the mantel, said with dry precision, "That includes half Vienna." "Quite so," said Frau Kappel. "But not the young, usually. They wear imitation Paris and call it modern. This piece belonged to a woman with habits." When she had gone, Poirot turned to Elena. "At Baron Reisler's supper, which ladies were present?" "Myself not at all. Anna Berek, Lotte Weiss." "The singer?" "Yes. She is older than she pretends, poorer than she appears, and more observant than anyone credits." Poirot looked pleased. "Then she is promising." We found Frau Lotte Weiss in her apartment near the theatre An der Wien, wearing a silk dressing gown at noon and receiving visitors as though life itself were a permanent backstage interval. She had once, no doubt, been celebrated for beauty. Enough remained to explain why she still arranged every gesture as if under footlights. "Police," she said, lighting a cigarette, "always ask the wrong questions. They say, who was jealous, who was in love, who heard the shot? But in Vienna the better question is, who is desperate?" Poirot smiled. "Excellent. Let us begin there." She laughed once, low and bitter. "My dear Monsieur Poirot, at that supper everyone was desperate. Baron Reisler desperately preserving relevance. Dr. Seebach desperately preserving dignity. Old Berek desperately preserving his daughter's future. Young Novak desperately preserving his broken heart. Lucas desperately preserving his creditors from each other, and Anna—" She exhaled smoke. "Anna was the only one pretending she was not desperate." "In what way?" "She had got herself into something ugly." "Blackmail?" Lotte raised one penciled brow. "You move quickly." "Never as quickly as gossip." "That is true." She flicked ash into a tray shaped like a swan. "I do not know details, but I know fear. She had it under the powder that evening." "Did she and Lucas leave together willingly?" "Yes. That does not mean happily." "Who last spoke with them?" "Dr. Seebach, perhaps." He stopped Lucas near the doorway. They exchanged some sharp remark. Then Anna passed them, and Lucas followed. "What remark?" "I heard only Seebach say, 'If you go now, you are finished.'" I said, "And Lucas went anyway?" "Yes. Men often hurry toward disaster when told not to." Poirot asked about Anna's clothes, her gloves, her bag, the flower on the table, the sequence of departures. To each, Lotte gave answers precise enough to be useful and vague enough to be safe. As we were leaving, Poirot paused. "Mademoiselle, pardon, madame, did Anna possess an amber cigarette holder?" Lotte's eyes sharpened instantly. "So, you saw that? You recognize it?" "It was not hers originally. It belonged to someone else." "To whom?" Lotte smiled without warmth. "If I tell you, Vienna becomes smaller, but perhaps more honest." "Honesty is not a Viennese specialty." She rose and crossed to the window. "It belonged to Baron Reisler's late wife. Anna admired it once. After that I saw it in Anna's hand. Draw your own conclusions." Outside, I said. So Reisler gave it to Anna? Or Anna took it? Or the late Baroness gave it before dying? Too many possibilities. But it links the girl to Reisler's household more closely than he admitted. Do you suspect him? Poirot gave me a sidelong glance. My good Hastings, I suspect Vienna. That afternoon, Inspector Brenner invited us, though summoned is perhaps the more accurate term, to review statements at police headquarters. He had the look of a man who disapproved of outside assistance, but disliked missing an advantage even more. Dr. Seebach admits a quarrel, he said, laying out the papers, but claims it concerned an unpaid loan. Nothing more. Reisler says the same. Berek denies any knowledge of threatening letters. Novak is sentimental but harmless. And the caretaker? Asked Poirot. Old. Deaf in one ear. He found the bodies at 6:40. He swears the pavilion door was locked, but the window not fully latched. Poirot's eyes lifted. Locked from outside? From the corridor door. There is a key. And who had it? The caretaker, Reisler, by long-standing privilege. Occasionally Hartberg. Poirot said nothing for a moment. Brenner went on. Also, we recovered this from the ashes of the supper-room fireplace. He handed over a small metal object, blackened but intact. It was the frame of a lorgnette. Poirot turned it over. A lady dropped this? Apparently. Servants say Frau Weiss used one often, though she insists this is not hers. Did anyone else? Countess Eleanor sometimes. The Baron's late wife had several. Old ladies breed them. It proves little. Everything proves little, said Poirot. That is why one must gather much. Brenner studied him. You are not chasing romance. Good. Too many outsiders come to Vienna wanting tragedy with violins. No, said Poirot softly. I want arithmetic. That evening, Countess Elena invited us to dine privately. She lived more modestly than her name suggested, but with perfect order. No object was misplaced. No servant spoke above the necessary volume. One felt at once that she had been managing some form of decline for years and had done it better than most generals conduct retreats. After dinner, Poirot produced Lucas's note again. Your brother wrote, I have at last found the courage to refuse. Refuse what? She looked into the fire. I have been asking myself the same question. Did he ever speak of politics? Of old imperial circles? Of restorationists, nationalists, private clubs, foolish men playing at history? Her head turned quickly. Yes, that was the first true movement of alarm I had seen from her. Go on, said Poirot. After the war, many such men drifted about Vienna. Some harmless, some absurd, some dangerous. They talked of legitimacy, betrayal, the old blood, the humiliation of republics. My brother frequented them at times because they dined well and paid badly. Names? She hesitated. There was one circle in particular, half social, half conspiratorial. They called themselves the Black Court. Ridiculous, I know. Ridiculous things are often useful covers, said Poirot. What did they do? Collected letters, favours, rumours. They trafficked in old correspondence between noble families, romantic scandals, financial appeals, wartime indiscretions. They believed documents were power. Poirot's expression sharpened at once. Letters, he said. Yes. And your brother? He carried messages for them once or twice. Later he wished himself free of them. Why later? Because one does not remain charmingly reckless forever. One day the game becomes extortion. Poirot rose and went to the mantel. My dear Countess, you should have told me this sooner. I had no proof it mattered. It matters enormously. She stood too. Do you think they killed him? "I think," said Poirot, "that your brother may have tried to step out of a machine that profits by memory and fear. Such machines do not like losing pieces." On the way home I said, "Then the Black Court is the answer." Poirot shook his head. "No, it is an answer. Perhaps the answer one is meant to see. But the person who staged the Pavilion understood not merely blackmail but theatre. That requires taste, vanity, and proximity. To whom? To all of them." He took off his gloves with unusual deliberation. "We are not yet at the truth, Hastings. We are only at the point where everyone begins to lie with intelligence." And now, before we resume, a brief word from the Bureau. Many of you ask where our stories may be found beyond YouTube. The answer is quite simple. Only one story makes its way to YouTube each week. Beyond that, we publish 3 new stories every week on Patreon, where supporters help us keep the lamps lit, the papers in order, and the next mystery upon the writing desk. For those who are not in a position to support us there, 2 of those weekly stories are also released on Spotify. And Spotify is free. There is no need for a paid membership. Much like YouTube, listening there without paying still supports the creator through advertisements. For those who prefer to support the show more directly, we also have Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal, and you will find those links in the description below. The plain truth is that our YouTube channel is not monetized. That means these stories continue only because listeners choose to support them through Patreon, Spotify, Buy Me a Coffee, and PayPal. Without that support, productions of this kind become very difficult to continue. For those who wish to step inside the archive, Patreon offers The Listening Room, $2.99 a month, ad-free episodes and early access, The Writing Table, $12 a month, voting on themes, behind-the-scenes notes, character sheets, inspirations, alternate endings, and your name in our monthly credits. The Archive Society, $30 a month. Quarterly ebook anthologies in PDF and EPUB, with your name printed among the patrons of the Archive Society. Our thanks, as ever, to those who make these stories possible. And now, back to the case. Chapter 4. The Pavilion in the Snow. If there is one thing Poirot likes almost as much as orderly data, it is an experiment. The following morning he insisted upon revisiting the Pavilion at the exact same hour the bodies were believed to have been arranged. Inspector Brenner objected. Poirot overruled him with infuriating politeness and the aid of Countess Elena's influence. Thus, shortly after 1 o'clock, we found ourselves once more in the little octagonal room, while Vienna lay under a fresh skin of snow. Poirot had brought chairs, a rose, 2 empty glasses, and me. "I dislike being one of your props," I said. "My friend, you are the most indispensable of my props. Sit there." He placed me in Lucas's chair and himself in Anna's, then shifted each by fractions until they faced at the precise angles described by the caretaker. "Now," he said, "if you had wished to stage this scene after death, what difficulties arise?" "Well, wait for one. Bodies are awkward." "Exactly, and?" "You must avoid blood showing where it should not." "Good, continue." "You would need time, privacy, some certainty that no one would interrupt." Poirot nodded and paced the room. And yet the scene as found was not merely posed. It was composed. The rose, the glasses, the chairs, the hand near the pistol. This is not the hurried work of panic. He crossed to the hearth again, crouched, and peered up the chimney. "Hastings." "Yes?" "Observe." There on the black inner lip, almost invisible, was a thin smear of pale grease. "Face cream," I suggested. or theatrical makeup, or pomade, something transferred from fabric or skin brushing the edge. He stood. Why would anyone lean into an unused hearth in a death chamber? To hide something? Precisely. He reached his arm up with the help of Brenner's walking stick, felt about for a moment, and drew down a folded scrap lodged on the ledge above the firebox. Brenner took a step forward. You might have mentioned the possibility. Poirot glanced at him. Then you would have looked for it, Inspector, and deprived me of the pleasure. The scrap proved to be the corner of a letter, partly scorched, bearing only a few words, and an initial. After Schönbrunn. Burn the rest. K. Brenner swore under his breath. K for Karl, I said. Seebach. Or Kurt, or Conrad, or Clara, said Poirot. Initials are the refuge of the dramatically unhelpful. Even so, it was progress. Brenner sent the scrap at once for comparison with papers seized from several houses. Poirot, meanwhile, wished to know how one entered and exited the pavilion unseen. We traced the paths, the servants' routes, the garden wall, the side gate opening toward a quieter lane. It became clear at once that a person familiar with Schönbrunn's less public corners might come and go without much notice, especially after a private supper where guests were expected to drift toward their own adventures. On our return to Reitzler's, we encountered Dr. Karl Seebach in the Baron's library. He was a hard-faced man in his 40s, spare and severe, with the air of one perpetually restraining disgust. Doctors of that type always make me uneasy. They look as if human weakness offends them professionally. He did not bother with courtesy. "Are you here to pry into debts?" he asked. "Then save time. Lucas owed me money." "How much?" asked Poirot. "Enough to be insulting, not enough to make murder economical." That was neatly put. "You warned him," said Poirot. "If you go now, you are finished." "I did." "Meaning?" "Meaning that if he went with the girl to settle that evening's matter, he would ruin himself." "What matter?" Seebach's jaw tightened. "Not my secret to tell." Poirot's tone remained gentle. "Doctor, 2 people are dead, and half Vienna is delighted by the shape of it. Do not ask me to join the feast." That, oddly enough, made me like him a little more. Poirot changed course. "Did Mademoiselle Berec consult you professionally?" The doctor paused half a beat too long. "Yes." "For what?" "I am not obliged to disclose private medical matters." "No, but perhaps you are obliged to disclose if they bear upon murder." Seebach's eyes turned flat. "She was frightened," he said at last. "Not ill, frightened. She wished advice about a man who would not return certain letters." "Lucas?" "No." "Who then?" "I do not know, or rather I know only the type. An elegant parasite who calls extortion necessity." Poirot let that sit. "And Lucas wished to intervene?" "I believe so. He had a sentimental streak where endangered women were concerned. It was among his least practical qualities." That, too, was new. As we left the library, Poirot said quietly, "He tells the truth selectively, but he tells it." "Then Seebach is out?" "No one is out, but he is not our dramatist." That evening another thread presented itself. Brenner had located the florist's assistant who prepared the roses for Reitzler's supper. According to the girl, the flowers were delivered in a box tied with black ribbon, except for one special rose, separately wrapped in tissue at the Baron's personal instruction. "A special rose?" I said. "Yes," said Brenner, "with a short card attached. The card is gone." Poirot's head tilted. "What kind of card?" "Plain ivory." "For whom?" The inspector spread his hands. "The florist's assistant did not know." Now that was interesting. The rose in the pavilion had not merely been borrowed from table decorations. It had been prepared in advance, for a purpose. Then someone intended a message, I said. Or a prop, said Poirot. Late that night, when sensible people were indoors and I had every right to be warm, Poirot dragged me to the side lane near the Schönbrunn gate. Snow still showed impressions where earlier traffic had half frozen and softened again. He stood under a lamp studying the ruts and prints with maddening concentration. What on earth are we looking for? Not what, when. We compared the gatekeeper's recollection, the servant's statements, the distance from Reitzler's to the Pavilion, and the reported time of the shots. No one had heard shots, which in itself was suggestive. Either there had been muffling of some kind, or the deaths occurred at a moment different from the one implied by the stopped clock and the stage tableau. Poirot finally straightened. My friend, we have been accepting too much. What now? That Lucas and Anna died in the Pavilion. I stared. But they were found there. Yes, found there. Not necessarily killed there. The cold suddenly felt sharper. You think they were moved? Perhaps one, perhaps both, or perhaps killed at different times. That seems devilishly complicated. Poirot turned up his collar. Murder is often simpler than concealment. It is concealment that requires imagination. Then why pose them facing one another? Because the killer wished not merely to hide truth, but to replace it with a legend. As we walked back through the snow, the dark bulk of Vienna around us, I began to see the thing differently. Not as a lover's tragedy, not even as a straightforward blackmail murder, but as a construction, something built piece by piece for effect. And in such constructions, every ornament matters. The rose, the clock, the note, the letters, and perhaps most of all the audience. Chapter 5. Echoes of Mayerling. By the fifth day, the city had begun to hum with the case in earnest. One could hear it in cafés, in hotel lobbies, in the lowered voices of women leaving matinees. Vienna had decided it liked the story. That was dangerous. Once society enjoys a lie, truth becomes an inconvenience. Poirot naturally became more fastidious than ever. He spent the morning arranging slips of paper across our table, names, times, motives, objects, while I attempted to follow what seemed to me an unnecessarily insect-like method. Listen, I said at last. Let us be practical. Lucas was involved with blackmailers. Anna was being threatened over letters. They meet. Something goes wrong. One of the blackmail circle kills them both and arranges the rest. There. Poirot did not look up. You have the admirable gift, Hastings, of making complexity sound like a railway timetable. Unfortunately, human beings do not keep such punctuality. He tapped 3 slips. First, the special rose was prepared before the deaths. Second, Lucas sent his sister a note saying falsehood would be spoken tomorrow. Third, Anna told Novak that Lucas was not the one she feared. Therefore, Lucas knew of a threat already in motion. He did not create it. Then he came to stop it. Likely. And failed. Certainly. He shifted another slip. But why the imitation of Mayerling? Why this particular poetry? That is personal, not practical. Countess Elena arrived before luncheon with the answer to one piece of that question. She had searched among her brother's papers and found references to a small private performance held some months earlier at Reitzler's house. A dramatic reading based, of all things, on the Mayerling affair. Among those present had been Reitzler, Lotte Weiss, Dr. Seebach, Anna Berwick, Lucas, and several others. Vienna dining out on its own corpse, I muttered. Exactly, said Poirot. The old scandal was not merely known to them, it had been played with. Elena also brought a more useful object. A visiting card found tucked inside one of Lucas's account books. On the back, in hurried pencil, were the words, "Bring what he wants and come alone. The Pavilion." After 1. No signature. But the card itself had once belonged to Baron Reisler. "That is bad for him," I said. "It is bad for someone," said Poirot. "Cards travel." He asked Elena one further question. "Did your brother ever speak kindly of Anna?" The Countess considered. "Not kindly, respectfully once. He said she had more courage than sense, which in Vienna was almost a compliment." When she had gone, Inspector Brenner appeared with fresh news. The charred scrap from the Pavilion chimney matched a notepaper used in Reisler's house library. More importantly, the burned fibres showed traces of sealing wax of a dark green kind also used by the Baron. "Then Reisler wrote the note," I said. Brenner looked grim. "Or someone in his house did." Poirot asked, "What of the shots?" Brenner answered that the medical estimates were less exact than first announced. The doctor who examined the bodies now admitted death might have occurred as much as an hour before discovery patterns suggested, owing to cold and subsequent handling. "Handling?" I said sharply. Brenner met my gaze. "A body moved shortly after death in winter may mislead." Poirot's eyes flashed. "Ah. Now at last we had official permission to doubt the scene entirely." That afternoon, Poirot insisted on one more interview with Baron Reisler. We found him alone, visibly less composed than before. The newspapers were beginning to peck at his name. He did not ask us to sit. "You have had your entertainment," he said. "Surely by now you see what this is. A sordid entanglement made picturesque by fools." Poirot took from his pocket the card summoning Lucas to the Pavilion and laid it on the desk. Reisler stared. "I have many cards." "This one was in Count Lucas's papers." "That proves nothing." "And the special rose?" A silence. "Was it intended for Anna Berek?" asked Poirot. Reisler gave an impatient gesture. "Yes, if you must know, she had talent. I supported young talent." "With roses? With opportunities? And amber cigarette holders?" For the first time, colour rose in his face. "That was an old trinket. My wife had no use for it." "Your wife was dead." "All the more reason." Poirot regarded him. "You were fond of the girl?" Reisler's voice hardened. "Do not mistake me for a sentimental old fool. I was interested in her future." "Was she interested in yours?" No answer. Poirot changed tone slightly, though not enough to soften it. "Baron, did you write summoning Lucas to the Pavilion?" "No." "Did Anna know of the arrangement?" "I do not know." "Did you know she was being blackmailed?" Reisler's eyes flicked away for a fraction. "Yes." "There it is," murmured Poirot. "Only in general terms. A packet of letters. Nothing unusual." "Nothing unusual?" Poirot repeated softly. "Young women threatened with ruin are usual, then, in your circle." Reisler's hand struck the desk. "Do not preach to me. Your republics and democracies have changed everything except appetite. Men still want scandal. Families still pay to bury it. If I kept some matters quiet, it was mercy." "No," said Poirot. "It was trade." Reisler said nothing more. Outside, I let out my breath. Good Lord. "Yes," said Poirot. "The Baron is corrupt in the old Polish style. But corruption is not always murder." That night, the final piece before the end fell into place, and with absurd triviality. It came from Frau Kappel, the seamstress, who sent word that she had remembered where she had seen glove fasteners of the same mother-of-pearl type. Not on a glove at all. On an evening reticule, a small beaded bag, belonging to Lotte Weiss. We went to her at once. She admitted the reticule existed, but claimed she had mislaid it weeks before. Poirot asked. Where? At Reisler's, perhaps, or in a cab, or in life. One loses many things. And did you lose your lorgnette also? At that, she went still. So, said Poirot, the burned frame in Reisler's fireplace was yours. Lotte laughed, but with strain. You are very clever, Monsieur Poirot. Does cleverness give you pity? Sometimes. Then have some now. She sat down abruptly, suddenly looking every year she had hidden. I saw Anna after midnight, she said. Not in the salon, in the little blue corridor outside the library. She was crying. Not dramatically, truly. She had a packet of letters in her hand. Lucas was with her. He said he would take them and settle it. With whom? She said only how he will never stop. Then I heard someone coming and I left. Who was coming? I did not see. I heard the Baron's cane. Did you go to the Pavilion later? A pause. Then, yes. Why? Because I feared stupidity. In Vienna, when men and girls go out into gardens after midnight, stupidity is generally nearby. What did you find? Nothing. The room was empty. I dropped the reticule clasp there, perhaps. I do not know. I heard footsteps outside and fled. Whose footsteps? I did not see. She covered her face with one hand. I said nothing because I did not want my name dragged through this muck. I have had enough of being the faded woman in other people's stories. Poirot's voice softened. And the fireplace at Reisler's? My lorgnette frame bent that night. I threw it in the grate. That is all. When we left, I said, Then Lotte is only a coward. Poirot shrugged. Cowardice is common. Murder less so. He stopped under a street lamp, the snow light making his face seem oddly sharp and pale. We are nearly there. To whom? Poirot looked up at the dark windows of Vienna. To the person who understood that everyone in this case would protect scandal before truth. And you know who it is. I know enough. But you said no reveal until... Poirot gave me a look. My friend, only because I know enough does not mean you do. That was the last thing he said before bed, and it annoyed me so much that I slept badly. Some of you have asked if there's another way to support us right now. There is one we'd like to share, and it's something my wife and I created together. Alongside Nocturnal Tales, we wrote a children's book called Sherlock Paws and the Diamond of the Nile, available on Amazon. It's a classic detective story, reimagined for younger readers, with one important twist. Sherlock Holmes is a dog. In this story, Sherlock Paws and his loyal companion Dr. Spot set off on an adventure to Egypt, where a valuable diamond has vanished. With noses twitching and tails wagging, they rely on observation, logic, and attention to detail to uncover the truth. It's a mystery full of friendship, travel, and discovery, adventurous, but always warm and age-appropriate. The goal of the book is simple: to introduce children to detective thinking in a way that feels playful and engaging. Instead of noise and spectacle, the story rewards curiosity. Children are encouraged to notice clues, think things through, and enjoy how small details matter, just as they do in classic mysteries. If you have children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, or young readers in your family, this is a story we genuinely believe they might enjoy. And if you're looking for a way to support our work during this difficult period, purchasing the book helps us directly, while giving something tangible, thoughtful, and fun in return. As always, there's no obligation. We simply wanted to share something we made together with the same care we put into everything else. The link is in the description, and thank you truly for being here. Chapter 6. The Last Waltz at Schönbrunn. Inspector Brenner arranged the gathering with poor grace and excellent efficiency. It took place in Baron Reitzler's green salon, where all this ugliness had begun beneath chandeliers and polite music. Present were the Baron himself, Countess Elena von Hartberg, Istvan Berek, Dr. Seebach, Emil Novak, Lotte Weiss, Inspector Brenner, Poirot, and of course Vienna, when cornered, always prefers velvet upholstery. No one spoke much at first. Reitzler looked ill-tempered. Berek looked exhausted. Lotte looked already condemned by her own nerves. Only Poirot appeared at ease, which is to say, he was at his most dangerous. He stood by the mantel, hands lightly joined. Mesdames et messieurs, this case has suffered from a disease common to old cities, nostalgia. 2 dead young people were found in a pavilion. At once Vienna said, Mayerling, a lover's pact, a noble ruin, a romantic shame. How convenient. For once that story was accepted, nobody need ask the vulgar questions of money, blackmail, timing, and movement. He turned slightly toward Brenner. The inspector has confirmed that the bodies may have been arranged after death. That is essential. They were not discovered in truth. They were discovered in performance. No one moved. Count Lucas, Poirot continued, was not planning suicide. He wrote to his sister that absurd lies would be told the next day. He had found courage to refuse. Refuse what? Not love. Extortion. He had been entangled with a private traffic in letters and secrets, documents used as leverage among ruined families and ambitious opportunists. Berek closed his eyes. Anna Berek, said Poirot, was one victim of this trade. She possessed or had written letters that someone would not return. She was frightened. She sought help. Dr. Seebach knew this. Herr Novak saw her fear, and Count Lucas, for all his faults, chose at last to intervene. Poirot took up the special white rose from the table where he had placed one as a demonstration. This rose was prepared in advance, not borrowed at random. Someone intended a scene before the deaths occurred. Someone with knowledge of Vienna's taste for old scandal. His eyes rested briefly on Reitzler, then moved on. The Baron is guilty of many things. Vanity, exploitation, quiet corruption. He gave Anna gifts. He knew of the blackmail. He likely profited from silence more than once. But he is not the murderer. Reitzler gave a single bitter laugh, as if acquittal offended him almost as much as suspicion. Poirot continued. Frau Weiss went to the pavilion that night and found it empty. That tells us something crucial. The final arrangement occurred later than supposed. The stopped clock at 1:17 was false, touched afterward. The window scratch, the soot on the mantel, the burned scrap in the chimney, all are signs of correction, not occurrence. He turned toward Dr. Seebach. Doctor, you warned Lucas. If you go now, you are finished. You knew he was going to meet the blackmailer and recover the letters. Seebach answered tightly, Yes. But you did not kill him. You are too severe for melodrama. A faint grimace passed over the doctor's face. It might almost have been relief. Poirot now faced Istvan Berek. Monsieur Berek, you lied because you wished to protect your daughter's name. That is understandable, but your silence protected also her killer. Berek's voice came hoarse. I did not know. No. Had you known, you would not be sitting so still. Poirot let the silence stretch. Then he said very quietly, The murderer is a person overlooked because everyone considered this person either decorative, pitiable, or secondary. Yet this person was present at all the necessary points. This person understood letters, access, and theatre. This person knew Anna's fear, Lucas's vanity, Reitzler's habits, and Vienna's appetite for legends. Lotte Weiss made a small sound in her throat. I thought for one wild instant he meant her. But Poirot had turned elsewhere. To stage Mayerling, he said, one needed not merely imagination but resentment. Resentment of youth, of beauty, of all the chances once missed. One needed someone who could move among these decayed circles as trusted family, physician, advisor, keeper of secrets. Someone who believed, perhaps honestly, that scandal must be managed by force if necessary. He looked directly at Dr. Karl Seebach. Then, with maddening calm, he said, "No, not the doctor." Seebach actually jolted. Poirot's gaze slid past him and came to rest on Countess Elena von Hartberg. The room seemed to empty of air. "Hastings," Poirot said without looking at me. "You are surprised. Good. It means the arrangement worked on you also." Elena did not move. Only her hands, folded in her lap, tightened. Inspector Brenner said sharply, "Countess?" Poirot bowed his head a fraction. "Yes, Countess Elena, the most composed person in Vienna, the sister who came for justice, the woman who had motive, access, intelligence, and above all discipline." At last Elena spoke. "That is absurd." Poirot's voice remained almost gentle. "No, it is tragic, but not absurd. You knew of the Black Court and the letter trade because your brother was involved. More than involved. He endangered your family's last securities. He had taken documents not belonging to him. Among them were Anna's letters, yes, but also papers compromising others, perhaps even you. He meant to break away, perhaps to bargain, perhaps to save the girl. You saw disaster coming, public scandal, financial ruin, the final collapse of the Hartberg name you had spent years preserving." Her face stayed white and still. Poirot went on. "You also knew Vienna. You knew Mayerling would smother inquiry under romance. You had attended the dramatic reading months before. You understood exactly how to build the image." Brenner stepped forward. "What evidence?" Poirot answered without taking his eyes off Elena. "The note to the sister first of all. Convenient, yes? Too convenient. Count Lucas never wrote to her by her own admission. Yet suddenly, on the critical night, a message arrives neatly preparing her disbelief. That note was genuine handwriting, but not written that night. It had been kept. Perhaps from some earlier quarrel, perhaps from some other context. The Countess produced it at the perfect moment." Elena's lips parted slightly. Nothing came out. Poirot continued. "The card summoning Lucas to the Pavilion was written on Reisler's stock, easily obtained by anyone in the circle. Anna's threatening letters placed the matter in motion. Lucas met someone that night, yes, but not his killer alone. He trusted his sister more than he trusted anyone." I stared at Elena. Poirot's voice sharpened. "She met him first. There was an argument. He refused to hand over the packet or abandon his intention. She shot him." "No," whispered Berek. Poirot nodded toward him. "Yes, and later Anna arrived, perhaps summoned separately, perhaps expecting Lucas. She found not a lover, but death. The Countess could not let her go. Anna knew too much. So she too was killed." Lotte Weiss gave a faint cry and pressed a hand to her mouth. Elena still sat straight-backed, but there was now something dreadful in the stillness. Not innocence. Compression. "The arrangement," said Poirot, "came afterward. The chairs, the rows, the pistol near Lucas's hand, the clock altered, the burned scrap hidden when part of the plan changed, the soot on the mantel where the Countess leaned while concealing it, the window unlatched to suggest confusion of entry, and the final touch, the appeal to old Vienna, to imperial tragedy, to a city that prefers beautiful lies to ugly truths." Brenner said, "And the proof linking the Countess physically?" Poirot drew from his pocket a small object wrapped in paper. The mother-of-pearl fragment found in the carpet was at first thought to belong to Frau Weiss. A reasonable error. But Frau Kappel later identified a second source for such fittings. evening reticules altered by certain high-end houses before the war. Countess Elena owned one. More importantly, he unfolded the paper. Inside lay a matching mother-of-pearl clasp piece recovered, he explained, from Elena's handbag by police that morning under Brenner's warrant. The Countess at last looked at Brenner, not Poirot. "You searched my things." Brenner said nothing. Poirot gave the final stroke. "And one thing more. Count Lucas was right-handed, but the angle of blood on the cuff found in the police photographs showed his arm had hung downward before being repositioned. Someone shorter than he was had difficulty arranging him. A woman of the Countess's height could do exactly what was done, with effort, but not elegance. I tested the matter in the Pavilion." Elena stood then. I had expected collapse, protest, some hysterical scene such as novels love. There was none. She stood with perfect dignity and looked at Poirot as though seeing him for the first time. "You make me sound theatrical," she said. Poirot answered, "No, madame, only desperate." A silence followed that seemed to belong to another century. Then she said, "He would have destroyed us." No one answered. "He was charming," she continued, her voice level. "Everyone forgave him. Debts, lies, women, favors, papers passed from hand to hand. Always there was another excuse, another old friend, another sister to repair the damage. But this time," she looked at Berwick, "this time the scandal would not have ended with laughter." Berwick's face had gone grey. "And the girl?" asked Poirot softly. At that something changed in Elena's expression, not remorse exactly, but weariness stripped of pride. She should not have come. It was a monstrous thing to say, and somehow more terrible for being spoken quietly. Brenner stepped forward. "Countess Elena von Hartberg, I must ask—" She raised one hand. "No need. I will come." Then she turned to Poirot. "You are right about one thing, monsieur. Vienna likes beautiful lies, but it also breeds them." Poirot bowed slightly. "That is why one must be stubborn." She left between the inspector and a constable, not once looking back. For a long moment after the door closed, no one moved. At last, Lotte Weiss sat down heavily and said, with the flat astonishment of the living after catastrophe, "I thought it was one of the men." "That," said Poirot, "is why she succeeded as long as she did." Berwick covered his eyes. Riesler poured himself brandy with a visibly unsteady hand. Seebach stood staring at the carpet as if he despised the entire species. We went out into the evening snow without speaking. Vienna was very quiet. Bells sounded somewhere far off. A tram passed in a wash of yellow light. The city looked, from the outside, as lovely as ever. At last I said, "Did she ever love him? Her brother?" Poirot walked a few steps before answering, "Yes, that is the worst of it." "And Anna?" "She was collateral to pride, fear, and the worship of a dead world. Such worlds always ask for one body too many." We crossed the square slowly. Snow had begun again, soft and steady, covering the tracks of the day. Behind us Vienna glimmered in white and gold, still graceful, still haunted, still trying, as all old cities do, to make tragedy look elegant. But the truth, once dragged into the light, had no elegance at all. Epilogue. The real crime. The real scandal behind this tale was the Mayerling affair, one of the great tragedies of late imperial Europe. On January 30th, 1889, Crown Prince Rudolph of Austria, the only son of Emperor Franz Joseph I and heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was found dead at his hunting lodge in Mayerling, near Vienna. Beside him lay Baroness Mary Wetzera, his 17-year-old mistress. Their deaths shocked the empire and immediately gave rise to rumor, censorship, and legend. The court's first response was not honesty, but damage control. Early official statements claimed Rudolf had died of a sudden medical event, effectively trying to smother scandal before it spread. That version did not hold. As details leaked, the public story shifted toward a murder-suicide or suicide pact. And from that point onward, Mayerling became a breeding ground for speculation. The haste and secrecy of the imperial handling are a large part of why the case remained so famous. Today, the broad historical consensus is still that Rudolf killed Mary Vetsera and then himself, though historians have long argued over motive, sequence, and state of mind. Rudolf was known to be deeply unhappy, politically frustrated, and personally unstable. He was also trapped in an unhappy marriage to Princess Stephanie of Belgium. That combination of dynastic pressure, private despair, and destructive romanticism helped turn Mayerling from a court scandal into a symbol of a decaying empire. One major reason modern historians lean more firmly toward the suicide pact explanation is the later discovery of Mary Vetsera's farewell letters. In 2015, letters written by Mary shortly before her death were authenticated after being found in a Viennese bank archive. They strongly support the conclusion that she expected to die alongside Rudolf, which cut against some of the more elaborate murder conspiracies that had grown up over the decades. Even so, Mayerling has never lost its aura of mystery. Not because the basic outline is unknowable, but because the case sits exactly where history becomes legend. A crown prince, a teenage aristocrat, a locked room, a panicked court, and an empire already beginning to rot beneath its gold braid. That is why the affair still fascinates. It was not just a private tragedy. It felt, even then, like an omen. And in a sense it was. Rudolf's death disrupted the Habsburg succession, and the dynasty never truly recovered its old certainty afterward.
Thank you for staying with us until the end of the story. If you enjoyed tonight's tale, do subscribe and share it with someone who appreciates a proper mystery. It helps more than most people think, and it remains one of the simplest ways to help this show continue. If you'd like more stories, you can find our full back catalogue on Patreon and Spotify, with extra new stories there as well. And if you'd like to support our work more directly, you can do so on Patreon. Tiers start at $2.99 with ad-free listening and extra stories, or for occasional support via Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. All links are in the description. Thank you for listening. And now, be fair before you are certain, and do not let confidence outrun the facts. Good night.